NESG 31 is holding here in Abuja. Yes, and the thrust of this event, a lot has been said here at this gathering. We must start with the policies of government and a lot of analysis. The Vice President represented President Bola Ahmed Tinubu at this event, and a lot of discussions around Nigeria's economy. International parties, business leaders, industry watchers, and of course thought leaders attended this gathering, all in this room, building a progressive and prosperous Nigeria, looking at 2030. They're talking about the policies of President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, particularly the removal of fuel subsidy and, of course, the unification of the currency. And most participants here today agreed that those steps were the right steps to be taken by this administration, considering where the economy was at that time. But looking at the conversations in this room, the focus is around how to build an inclusive economy. That discussion has also been on for some time, looking at the fallout of these reforms on the masses. Many say government seems to be getting the macro aspect of this right, but what happens to the micro, the people on the streets that are talking about the price of food, price of electricity, price of fuel, and all of that? Also, stability in the oil and gas market was something that was reckoned with by the Vice President. Mentioned it in his speech. He talked about the fact that oil production is hitting 2 million barrels. That is expected by the end of the year. At the moment, it's about 1.8 million barrels per day, which is also increased revenue for Nigerian government. He talked about the tax reforms that was also raised at this gathering, which should be implementation should start by January 2026. And everyone is talking about the positives of this, and also, of course, the limitations and the challenges that might come with the implementation of this tax reforms. That was also raised at this gathering. I must tell you, the quality of guests that attended at this event, that are still attending, it's highly commendable. Leaders in the industry, managing directors of banks, and of course of other financial institutions, insurance institutions, business analyzing, and all of that. We also have government officials here. I just spoke to the Minister of Budget and National Planning, who also bared his mind and talked about the renewed hope agenda, what government is doing to address the fallout of this negatives, because that really is the issue in the forefront of government now, how to address all of this. Also, we have sub-themes around this conference. Some will focus on industrialization. We've talked more about what's happening in the manufacturing industry, where government is talking about buy Nigeria, made in Nigeria products should be encouraged. That will help protect our currency, strengthen our currency, and of course also help increase our reserves. At the moment, according to the central bank, our foreign reserves stand at about $43 billion, and that would suit for our imports for more than 8 to 9 months, which is of course based on international standard, that is commendable to government. So the central bank are on their side, and that's the fiscal and the monetary side. They've continued to work hand in hand. There's that handshake between both parties to make sure that the economic development sinks and we get inclusive growth across the board. So looking at all of this, these discussions will go on for 3 days. It continues tomorrow. There are a lot of sub-sessions that will still go on after today. So all of this will continue to move. Also, another sub-theme that came to me now is issue about sustainable development, talking about our institutions. How can we have institutions that would outlive everyone, that would do better than what they're doing at the moment? How do we make sure that our institutions are accountable and credible, to whatever they're meant to do? So that's also something that was raised at this gathering. Now, talking about export, Nigeria needs to improve exports. You will recall with me that earlier this year, the Nigerian Export Promotion Council came up with the figure of about 19% increase in our export earnings. Highly commendable figures, but many will still tell you that more can be done. Adding value to our farm produce, adding value to our export produce is also something that has been raised in this room today, and everyone is talking about how we can make that happen. That's also been on the front burner. The AFCFTA is something that is also on one side. That's the Africa Continental Free Trade Area. And many have talked about the positive of these African countries coming together to trade. How do we address this trade challenges that we have with trade? How can we facilitate trade more amongst each other, particularly with what is happening in the United States, the tariff issues? All of this are the front burner. Issues around budget allocation, issues around how to manage resources, because also many have talked about proper fiscal management is key for Nigeria's development. At this time, government is making more revenue from the non-oil space, and subsidy is a way. What happens to managing these funds? That is also something that came up at this gathering, and the Vice President said it clearly that the government is focused on making sure that every kobo is accounted for, and it must impact the masses. So they are given a timeline that, looking at all of these policies being instituted by government, they expect that everybody, the man on the streets, buying food, inflation, and all of this should start to taper down, at least as we get to the end of the year. The target was 15%. But some say, well, it could get to 16, 18. At the moment, we're at about 20%, a little above 20%. So that looks, some analysts say, it looks feasible one way or the other, if that would getting 18 to 17% inflation level for the end of 2025. But this needs to be sustained in 2026, and that's why we have to stay the course. And staying the course of these reforms is another big one at this gathering. I have someone who would also like to speak to me now. He was also inside this hall, and he had a report that we talked about inside the hall. He is Dr. Wilson Eromobo. He's a senior economist with the Nigerian Economic Summit Group. He joins me now here. Good to see you, Dr. Wilson, to have this chat with you, Dr. Wilson. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
All right then. Deep down inside there, you talked about this new report that you just launched. Tell us more about it, and how it affects this theme of this event today, which is the reform imperative, building a prosperous Nigeria for 2030, right?
Yeah, so what we did was to launch a report which we called From Hustle to Decent Jobs, Unlocking Jobs and Productivity for Economic Transformation in Nigeria. So basically what we're saying is, how do we create better jobs? Which sectors will drive these jobs? And then how many jobs, should we even create going into 2030? And we just answered that question. So it's basically like the state of jobs in Nigeria and what needs to be done to improve the quality of jobs that we have. So that's what we launched today at the summit.
So what kind of jobs are we looking at now?
Yeah.
Looking at our environment, our particularity of our own environment. What sort of jobs are we looking at?
So for context first, so if you look at the numbers from NBS, you'd find that 80% of Nigerians are working in sectors with very low productivity. So if you measure labor productivity and share of employment, you would notice that 80% of Nigerians fall within that category. And then so informal employment is about 92% of total workers in the country. So what this means is that there are a lot of people that are clustered in low productive sectors. Most people are just hustling. They're doing day-to-day jobs, laborers, POS merchants, petty trading, and all of those things. And what we concluded is that if we continue with this trend, those jobs are not enough to lift people out of poverty, those kinds of jobs. So we need better jobs. We need to open up key sectors that contribute mid to high level productivity jobs. We're talking of agro-processing, manufacturing, construction, ICT was one of the sectors, and then professional services. So we're looking at maybe research, consulting. We think more Nigerians, and these sectors can absorb more Nigerians if they're properly trained to do this work. And so the key or the thrust of our arguments is that the private sector has to expand for that to happen.
Because there was a time there was a revision from the NBS figures with unemployment that we are now around 5% or something, and that has been a talk everywhere at forums where I have attended. So, do you think that all of these jobs you talked about, because they talked about, for example, there are some lawyers that will just go to court once or twice in a month, but they earn more than someone that even works for 30 days. So, how do we balance all of this? Looking at your own report.
So for unemployment, I think what the NBS did was to say people are hustling, people are working, people are not just staying at home to work. But one thing I would say is that if we quote that unemployment number of 5% or 4.3%, depending on the quarter that you look at, we have to also quote the figure that says 92% of Nigerian workers are in informal employment. So even if you say people are working, what kind of, is it quality jobs? So people are hustling, and what we're arguing is that we need better jobs. So whether it's 5%, I mean, there are arguments with the methodology that, why should we have same unemployment as France and some of the other, advanced countries? But they don't have over 90% in informal employment. So both statistics must go hand in hand to tell you that there is still a job problem. There's a labor market problem. And we contextualize it in a way that it's not just a labor market crisis. It's a developmental challenge that we have to fix.
So finally, back home, looking at Nigeria, which is what we are talking about, and that's why we are here. Do we have quick wins to address this issue of unemployment? You talked about some sectors. How easy? It's not very easy to get into some of those sectors. They seem to be capital intensive, meant for the big boys in some cases.
Well, I think there are quick wins. Not everyone will be capital intensive. But one of the things, before we even move to the sectors, you see, skills development is something I think we've overlooked. There's so many training programs in government here and there. What you find is when these people get trained, where do they get to deploy that skills? In fact, some of those guys with tech skills, they go abroad. So it's just like we're training people for other countries, which again, not necessarily a bad thing. But the reason why they go abroad is because they can't find opportunities here, and so that's the opportunity that we have to create. So skills development has to be tied to industrial needs. So don't just train people for foreign countries. Ask our private sector, what do you need? What skills do you need? How do you change some of the programs and improve them to be sure that they deliver the needs of the people? Then on the sectors, we still waste tomatoes. We still waste so many products. We can't process cassava into industrial starch to meet the needs of flour mills, Unilever, and the big firms. These are opportunities that I think can be leveraged. Policy needs to unlock these opportunities, provide access to clean water in places where you have these raw materials, access to infrastructure, energy, solar, and all of those things. I think a combination of that, but there has to be that intent from governments, from the policy side, to want to do that micro work of ensuring that people can invest in key sectors. So outline this. And one of the things we also argued is that everything has to be coherent in an industrial policy for the country, because otherwise everybody will just keep doing one or two things and we're working in silos as we've always done in the past. Have a standard industrial policy that contextualize the problem of jobs, of how do we grow capacity within industry, and how do we ensure industries, small businesses scale. And I think that's a very important thing from the session.
Now let's wrap this up. NESG has been doing this for a while.
Yeah.
This is NESG 31.
Yeah.
I would say that how would you say government has been taking recommendations from your event? You understand? How would you say government has been taking recommendations? For 31 years, NESG has been running this event. How would you assess government? How receptive has government been with taking your recommendations and all? And what would you say would be the strongest message for this year as we move on?
Well, it can be better in terms of how they take the recommendations and how they implement it. I think it can be better. We can move faster than this. But again, because I know there are so many initiatives that have come out of the summit, whether it's the ERGP, even the Vision 2020. I led part of the team on the development planning 2021-2025. Even things like the ease of doing business, the Presidential Enabling Business Environment Council. which solved some of the issues we had at the port and so many other issues, came out of the summit. I remember that summit where we brought one of the former Prime Minister of Georgia to come tell us how he resolved doing business issues in his country, and that led to that PEBEC, the creation of PEBEC and many other initiatives. So yes, there's been maybe one or two areas where the summit has delivered in terms of programs and imperfect programs, but I think it could be better. I mean, we could always have this conversation, but what I always say is that if we don't stop talking, if we don't stop dialoguing and having these conversations, who knows where we would have been by now. So the summit is also a way of putting pressure on government and saying, look, the private sector is here, we're looking at you, we need better policies, and this is how we think you should do it. So yes, maybe next 50, hopefully we won't be talking about access to finance, poor access to finance, poor access to electricity. So maybe next 50, I don't know. I hope by then these are not the issues we're talking about, and we're talking about how to go to the moon or something. But yeah, I mean, it's always a pleasure being part of the conversation.
Dr. Wilson Erumebo is a senior economist with Nigerian Economic Summit Group. I must thank you so much for having this conversation with us at TVC News. Thank you. So you've heard it from Dr. Erumebo, who's a senior economist with the NESG. This presentation was around job creation and how, we can leverage on opportunities that we have as a country. So this will continue, like I said, conversations will continue in this room for the next 2 days, and we have breakout sessions in different halls as you see around here, and everyone will be talking about Nigeria's economy, breaking it down bit by bit. And again, to touch on what the Minister of Trade, Industry, Trade and Investment spoke about earlier, talking about expanding the export market, talking about making that market as attractive as it could be. She made a lot of sense in saying that Nigeria is really ready for business. Don't forget that the International Intra-Africa Trade Conference, that's the ITF, the next one I think is in 2027, is going to happen in Nigeria. And Nigeria won that bid at the last ITF that held in Algiers. So all of this is a signpost that Nigeria is really ready for business, and they are saying that yes, we could take it up from there and actually be where we're supposed to be. But international partners that came in here today, they spoke. Some were part of the first panel session that held earlier when the Vice President was around. And I must tell you that they commended the President for his policies. They did commend the President that these bold steps have actually tried to reshape in Nigeria's entire economic landscape, and it also, according to them, has affected the perception that used to be about Nigeria not being certain about bringing in your funds and foreign direct investment, talking about foreign portfolio investments and all of that. Trade surplus is also on the increase, and all of this shows that confidence is gradually returning to Nigerian economy, according to experts in this room. Everybody speaking in the same voice and saying that all they still want government to be focused on more at this time is how to address the fallout. The most important aspect of that is agriculture. Many talked about how you can make food available. When a man has food on his table, I think part of, according to an adage, that part of the poverty is out of his life. So I think all of this, formed part of the conversation that we had in this room today, and I must tell you that it's been it's been worthwhile being in this room, listening to what's been happening. Mr. Taiwo Yedele also stepped in, and you know him for the tax laws and what is expected by 2026. He addressed some misconceptions, about the fossil fuel tax. Some had said that by next year 5% will be added to the money when you buy fuel, your bill 5% will be on it. We said no, that's a law that has been in existence before now, and if you check back, it's the FEMA Act that has been in existence. It's just for the Minister of Finance to sign into law if that's but according to them, that's not coming into effect in 2026. All of these contending issues, all of the issues that are not being understood by the public are being addressed in this room as everyone is talking about building an inclusive economy by 2030, even as government also targets a $1 trillion economy by 2030. Don't forget. So it's a race and everyone is moving at the same pace considering what we see in this hall. International bodies again are assuring Nigerian government that they are ready to stay with the government if they continue on this at this pace, because they believe clearly that confidence in the entire economy and the larger economy is something that will drive investment, and driving investment into this country is something that is very, very important. And Nigerian stock market also is not doing very badly. According to investors that came into this place, they talked about investing more in Nigerian stock market because they see stability. Stability is what an investor